start with my college football schedule preview and a point spread prediction videos. Today I'll be doing the Kansas State Wildcats. So this is a pretty tough schedule for Kansas State, but some good news for them is they only have to play one of the three best teams from the Big 12 conference last season. And Kansas State, even though they had a disappointing season last year, losing four games, it actually wasn't as disappointing as it seems. It was actually that several of the teams that they played turned out to be a whole lot better than they were expected to be. Three of their four losses were to the three best teams in the conference last season, BYU, Arizona State, and Iowa State. The only loss that Kansas State had last year that didn't make sense was the Houston loss, but other than that, they beat everybody that they should have, and I think that this schedule gives them a decent chance to get to the Big 12 championship. So they began the season against Iowa State in week zero in Ireland, and this will be the first game of the 2025 college football season, and it should be a good one because both teams I think are pretty even. Both teams are well coached, and Avery Johnson and Rocco Beck. I think it could possibly be two of the best quarterbacks in college football this coming season. For sure, they're going to be two of the best quarterbacks in the Big 12, and neither team's wide receiver room is great, but I think both teams could be two of the best rushing teams in the country this coming season. I'm pretty sure Kansas State will be one of the best rushing teams in the country, and both teams probably won't be great on defense, but they should both be decent on defense. And then they play North Dakota. And North Dakota is, I know, one of the best FCS teams. I know they did almost beat the Coach Prime Colorado Clown Show last year, but they shouldn't be any problem for Kansas State. And then they play Army. Army did win 12 games last year, and they were one of the best group of five teams. And they actually won the award for the best offensive line in the country last year, which I don't think made any sense because they didn't beat anybody any good. But they shouldn't be any problem for Kansas State. And then on the road at Arizona, this game, even though they're both in the Big 12 now, won't count as a conference game because before Arizona decided to join the Big 12, Kansas State and Arizona had scheduled to play two in a row in 24 and 25 as non-conference opponents. But this game shouldn't be much of a problem for Kansas State. Arizona was awful last year, and I do still like their quarterback Noah Fafita, but I don't think he has enough around him for them to be very good. So I'm not expecting much from Arizona this coming season. And then their first bye week does not come at a great time in between Arizona and Central Florida. Uh, Central Florida, I'm not expecting much from either. They are going to have a new coach this year, but they were as awful as Arizona was last year. And Kansas State will get three bye weeks because they play a week zero game, and I think that could benefit them. and then they'll play two in a row on the road at Baylor and then TCU because Baylor was actually one of the most surprising teams last season. They won 8 games. And TCU, even though they weren't near as good as they were in 22, they were a lot better last year than they were in 23. They actually won as many games as Kansas State did last year. They won 9 games. So it's hard to imagine Kansas State winning both of those two. And it's nice where their second bye week comes after those two in a row and right before the rivalry game on the road against Kansas. So even though Kansas State has dominated this rivalry, they've won 16 in a row against Kansas, and Kansas I know was not very good last year, and Kansas State should win this game, and I know Kansas doesn't have much of a home field advantage. Kansas has the last 2 years come very close to ending Kansas State's winning streak against them. And Kansas State having to play Texas Tech right after that one is going to make another tough two in a row because Texas Tech should be decent this year. They were decent last year. They won 8 games. It's going to be really hard, I think, for Kansas State to win both of those two. And then it's nice where they get their last bye week right before having to play 2 road games in a row against Oklahoma State and Utah. So Oklahoma State and Utah, even though I know they were two of the most disappointing teams in the country last year, neither one was very good. Kyle Whittingham and Mike Gundy in the past have usually been two of the most consistently good coaches in the country. And even though Oklahoma State and Utah's rosters don't look that good right now, Oklahoma State's and Utah's coaches have both had a bad looking roster before and turned it into a good team. And Oklahoma State and Utah in the past have usually been two of the tougher places to play in college football. So it's hard to imagine Kansas State winning both of those. And then they end the year against Colorado. This should be a win for Kansas State. I'm not expecting much from Colorado this year because Colorado couldn't even beat Kansas State last year when they had uh, two players that are going to be top 5 NFL draft picks. And Coach Prime has already been trying to leave Colorado to go to the NFL, but no one wanted him. So now he's stuck at Colorado, and he's going to have to show that he actually doesn't know what he's doing. So now for the point spread prediction, so games in the green are games where I think Kansas State will be favored to win by a blowout, 20 or more points, and there's two of those, North Dakota and Army. Games in the blue are games where I think Kansas State will be favored to win by double digits, at 10 to 19 points, and there's two of those, Arizona and Central Florida. Games in the pink are games where I think Kansas State will be favored to win by about a field goal, 1 to 5 points, and there's four of those: Baylor, TCU, Kansas, and Texas Tech. Games in the purple are games where I think Kansas State will be favored to win by about a touchdown, 6 to 9 points, and there's three of those: Oklahoma State, Utah, and Colorado. And games in the gray are games where I think Kansas State will be about a field goal underdog, so 1 to 5 points, and there's one of those at Iowa State. So North Dakota, I think Kansas State will be favored to win that by about 25 points. And Army, I think the spread will be about 3 touchdowns, maybe 21 points. And Arizona, I think Kansas State will be favored by about 17 points, and I think they'll be favored by about 17 against Central Florida. And Oklahoma State, I think Kansas State will be favored by, I'll say, 7 points. And Utah and Colorado, I'll say the spread will be 6 points. And Iowa State, because they were better than Kansas State last year, that one's in the gray. And I think Iowa State will be favored by, I'll say, 3. And Baylor, I thought about putting in the gray because they were almost as good as Kansas State was last year, and it is on the road. But I'll say Kansas State will probably be favored by a point or two over Baylor. And then at TCU, I think the spread will be about 5 points. And Kansas, I think Kansas State will be favored in that one by at least 2 points, but no more than 4 points. And Texas Tech, I think Kansas State will be favored by about 5 points. I think Kansas State's floor is 8-4, which is what they've been the last 2 seasons, because I think Chris Kleiman is too good of a coach for them to do any worse than that. But I think their ceiling is probably 10-2. So that will be it with this video. Please subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I'll be back soon.